We are a group of friends, bound by our appreciation for liberty and good podcasting. Free-minded thinkers from all walks of life, our values come together with one accord to discuss the common culture and news of the day, along with whatever random crap is going on in our lives. Welcome to the Union of the Unknowns.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Union of the Unknowns presents a chin wag. And I don't even remember exactly what I titled for this. Okay, wag your chin for surviving a volcano. And here with me, I have my fellow unknown, Terry Canary, the volcano buster. And we're about to get into what exactly it's like to survive a volcano. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get right into it. Terry, well, actually, let me ask you, how are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm very well, thank you. All the better for seeing you. It's been a while, hasn't it, since we've been together, so this is good.
Wonderful. Okay, yes. And this is a conversation that we have been wanting to have for quite some time. So I'm just going to do a brief overview, but basically in September of 2021, you really had a life disrupting event occur, and you had to leave your home. And one of the reasons, not only is this a very personal story to you, and it's something that you still are dealing with to this day, but it's also topical because we've had so many bizarre events that have displaced people that we know, all over the world in these last several years. So go ahead and just tell us a bit about where you live. Let's start there. Tell everybody where you live, the location, and what ended up drawing you to that place to begin with.
Okay, so we live on the island of La Palma in the Canary Islands. You can think of the Canary Islands as kind of a bit like Hawaii for our American viewers and listeners, in that there are a chain of volcanic islands, some of which are still fairly active, and La Palma is actually the most active at the moment. But it's very pretty, and we often say that if it wasn't for the volcanoes, it wouldn't be quite so pretty because it's very mountainous. Typical sort of volcanic landscape that you would see in Hawaii, sort of rugged hills and big valleys and covered in trees. So I think Fiona had to take early retirement. I think we talked about this in some of our health episodes, and we were looking for somewhere to live for sort of early retirement. And she found that she did better in better climates. So we needed somewhere kind of warm and a bit drier than the UK. Most places are drier than the UK. So we came here on holiday and we really liked it. As I say, it's a very pretty place. It's got a kind of nice vibe. There are lots of alternative type people living here, so you can get good organic food and people sort of living off the grid and having a very different sort of lifestyle. So all of that appealed to us. And so, we moved here, must be about 10 years ago now. So that would have been, say, 2015. So we've been here about 5-6 years when the volcano went off. Now, we knew it was a very active island. The last eruption that it had here was 1971, so not that long ago. And on average, it seems to have eruptions between every 50 and 100 years. So we thought there was a reasonable chance we wouldn't get one at all. And then we kind of figured, well, if we get one, it's unlikely to be in the place where we buy our house. And as it turned out, it's right where we bought our house. So if I was to turn the camera around and look out the window here, the volcano is sort of looming over our house, just about 1 kilometre away, I should say. So it's very close. So I'll pass over to you in case you've got any questions, and then I'll tell you about what happened actually on the day.
Yes. Okay. So, and I think that as odd as it may sound for most of us to be this close to a volcano, we, in whatever region that we live in, generally, especially here in the States, you're exposed to extreme weather. You certainly have the opportunity for extreme weather, or in your
Yeah.
case, extreme earth, um, all the time.
Extreme Earth.
Living on, yes, living
Yeah.
on the Southeast, United States, or living in the Southeast United States, we are at the risk of extreme weather a lot because we have the risks of hurricanes.
Yeah.
We have a very long hurricane season, as well as a lot of other severe weather that is, independent of hurricane season. So there's risk for tornadoes, of course, flooding,
Yeah.
severe storms, and a lot of that kind of thing. And we have certainly recently seen some of the extreme weather. We had that in Western North Carolina and East Tennessee, and just in the Southeast in general. So a lot of us do live with some type of extreme weather no matter where we live. So it makes sense to me that you would proceed to move to this place that was better for your health, better for your wife's health, in spite of an active volcano, because how often really does it happen? It's just not, the odds are just not good. But of course, in this
Exactly.
case,
Yeah.
it did happen to you. It happened to you both. So let's take it back to the very day. And a fun note for the listeners, we were in the Discord at this time because this was very recent COVID, and there was a
Hmm.
lot of discussion about what was happening with that, the rules and regulations, and pushing the injections. And we were constantly in Discord sharing what we had learned about the health side effects and the studies that were being done, and conversing about this. So I remember it very well that when this started happening. So Terry, take us back and go back a little bit before the day and tell us about what kind of alert system do they have there? What were there signs? Were there things that were um, saying that perhaps this could be happening? Take us back.
Well, you won't be surprised to hear, and our American viewers and listeners in particular won't be surprised to hear that the government system of organising this emergency was completely shambolic and chaotic. It was terrible. And even though they had a plan in place, it's exactly like you see with the wildfires and extreme weather and everything. They've got these plans in place. And what they said at the time here was that, we had this plan, nobody knew what it was. And so nobody was really doing the right things. So I'll get onto that a bit more later. It was shambolic. Suffice to say, just at this point, when you're talking about COVID, one of the things that really annoyed us about it was that during COVID, we had a little van driving around everywhere on the island saying, in Spanish, stay in your house, it's COVID, it's dangerous, stay in your house, stay in your house. For the volcano, we had nothing. So to go back to your question about, before the eruption, we didn't really know anything, because during COVID, of course, we threw away our TV because we got fed up with being propagandized. And we don't really do a lot on social media, other than talking to you guys and listening to podcasts. I'm not really that connected. All right, I'm back.
Can you hear me, Terry? I'm so sorry, you froze up. The
Yeah,
last thing that I heard, you said we
sorry.
threw away our TV. We were tired of being propagandized. We don't really do social media.
Yes.
Go.
Yes, that's fine. And then I realised I'd dropped out, so I stopped. So yeah, we didn't really know anything. And one of the upsetting things about it all was that there was a Brit that I got to know who lived here during COVID, because we met at a COVID protest, and he was a really nice guy, and he was really into yoga, and he was offering us free yoga classes at this amazing venue fairly close to us that we knew nothing about, that was just been completed, and it was like a kind of like a spa with a pool and with rooms to do yoga, and this guy was doing it all for us for free. And there was Fiona and I, and a French girl, and I think somebody else as well, and this guy taking the class. So we went there on Tuesday the 12th, I think it would have been, Tuesday the 14th of September. And when we got there, they said to us, "Oh, what do you think about us going to yellow alert for the volcano?" And we sort of went, "Yellow alert? What?" It's the first we'd heard of it. So they didn't bother driving a van around saying, "There's a volcanic emergency. You better be aware of what's going on." No, they didn't do anything like that. They didn't bother trying to contact any citizens, old people living in their houses who might need help evacuating. There was nothing like that at all. So we only found out from the yoga class, really. So this was on Tuesday. Bear in mind the eruption happened on Sunday. So that was 5 days later. And apparently there'd been increasing swarms of earthquakes for quite a few years beforehand, which again, nobody told us anything about. And this was when we got to know a lot of volcanologists during the eruption, because they were coming here sort of looking at stuff, and we would always go out and talk to them. So we learned a lot about volcanology during the eruption. It's a bit like COVID again. You find out from the good people what's really going on. And a lot of them were saying, "Oh, we knew this was going to happen. The people should have been alerted." And when we spoke to some New Zealand guys, volcanologists again, after this is a couple of years after, when we were being interviewed for documentaries and things, he said, "Oh, we'd have had you out there long before the weekend. That would not have happened in New Zealand. You'd have all been evacuated." So yeah, to cut a long story short, there was increasing series of earthquakes. It was getting really uncomfortable to live in the house. You were getting shaken awake in the early hours. Unfortunately, sorry, yeah, carry on.
So let me just interrupt you there, because I wanted to get, and I think you were headed in that direction, but I just wanted to make sure. Tell us, what does that mean? It was getting uncomfortable to live in your house. You said that you were starting to get shaken awake in the middle of the night. That's insane. Yeah, tell us more.
Yes. You're getting earthquakes more and more frequently, and fortunately, the Spanish government sort of scientists have got a very good website, a bit like the what's the American one called, the US Geological Survey. This is a good place to go if you want to look at earthquake information. So Spain's got a similar one, concentrated more on Spanish territory. So we were able to check the data, and we can see that the earthquakes were getting more and more intense, coming closer to the house and then coming closer to the surface as well. So it was all a bit worrying. And eventually they were coming every few minutes, quite strong, shaking you in your bed. Sometimes the worst ones, it was like a big truck driving into the side of the house and almost knocking you off your feet. Yeah, sorry, Ash, over to you.
Oh, no need to apologize. You don't apologize. You're our special guest, Terry. So okay, so do you know, a couple of questions. Do you know the strength of these kind of micro quakes that you were getting? First of all, and second of all, even though it wasn't on your radar as much when you moved, like, yes, you knew it was a possibility, but you had been unaware of this increase in the volcanic activity. So did you and Fiona begin to form an escape route just in case? And how likely, at the beginning of this, how likely did you think it was going to be that, like, I think we're going to have to leave?
Before we knew about the yellow alert, and there are 4 grades of alert, which I'll come back to because this is an important point. There's green, everything's okay. Yellow, volcano might be coming soon. Orange, volcano is imminent. And red, eruption is happening. So it turns out that orange alert doesn't really exist. I'll talk more about that later. So other than that, we knew there would be a risk because, but historically, the eruptions here have either been, in recent times, quite small and contained, or down in the south near the sea. So, the one in 1971, I don't think affected any properties. If it did, it was very few. And the one before that was 1947. And I think that was maybe just a couple of properties as well. It was a very thin stream of lava that went straight to sea, and it was quite small and didn't last that long. So we thought, well, it's probably not going to be that bad. And the chances are, if it does happen, it won't be that close because, it's going to be on the south side of the south end of the island because that's the more active zone. But, we're still talking about 30 miles, something that, it could be. And if it was like a couple of miles away, you possibly wouldn't be getting affected by it. And also we're quite a way up the hill. So if it happened closer to the sea, again, we wouldn't, in terms of the lava, we wouldn't have been affected. We'd still get, downfalls of ash and gases and things. But so on balance, we did talk about it and we knew it was a risk. And we even spoke to our insurance company about it. That's another story as well that I can go into. And so we thought, well, it's unlikely to happen. If it does, it looks like we're going to be covered. So we're willing to take the risk. And, to come back to the point you were making earlier, pretty much every place on Earth has got its own problems, isn't it? I mean, if you talk about living in California, you could get a giant earthquake that will knock everything flat. As you say, on the East Coast, you could get storms and hurricanes. Even in England, we get a lot of flooding because it's a wet country. So nature is unpredictable, which is yet another topic we could go into. Basically, it's they don't really know what's going to happen, even though the experts pretend that they do. So you never know what's going to happen. Really, it was I guess it was just fated to happen the way it did. Over to you.
Yeah, that's one thing that I want to establish just in case anyone is kind of having the thought process of why would you live somewhere with a volcano? Why would you move to this island knowing that they had an active volcano? So I just want to establish that we all have weather or environmental or earth risks wherever we live at. And you're exactly right, Terry. There, in California, you have the earthquake risk. You do have potential tsunami risk from other earthquakes, and you have the wildfire risk and things like that. So we do have volcanoes in the United States. We have had active volcanoes erupt here. Obviously, we had Mount St. Helen that happened in, I think it was 1980 here in the States. And that was quite, of course, it was a big deal and it was damaging to that area. So we all have these kinds of things. So it makes sense to me that you evaluated the risk of living in a place that was better for your health and making the decision and truly looking at historical data. What are the odds? Okay. So we have kind of led up to where we're getting close to the day of, the D-Day, basically, for you and Fiona, making the decision of what do we need to do here. But just to kind of reiterate that you had been talking to and connecting with people on the island. You were going to this yoga class with a guy from the UK, and that was how you ended up finding out that you were, quote, yellow alert for volcano activity. And then also during that time, you began to have increasing symptoms, if you will, in the form of these earthquakes that they were disrupting your life at this point and becoming more frequent. Is that a pretty good overview of leading up to that day?
Yes. And there's a few more things I'll mention just before the big D-Day. We were getting no information from authorities via the official route, but fortunately, one of our neighbours, who's a really nice guy, he's in what they call the Guardia Civil, which is Spain's militarized police, and he's quite high up in the Guardia Civil, so he knows what's going on. So he came to our house very kindly and gave us some great tips about what to take with us. We have an automatic gate that you press the button and it opens. It's very common on the island. He said make sure you park the car outside the gate, because if you get a bad earthquake, it might not open, and then your car will be stuck inside. And she said, make sure you're facing out so you can get a quick getaway. Gave us all these fantastic tips. It was really good. And then he said, oh, there's a meeting down at the locals, kind of like a sports centre, on the Thursday, this was. So 2 days after we found out about yellow alert. No, I think it was it Friday? Anyway, he told us on Thursday. The meeting was Friday or Saturday, I think. Anyway, we hadn't been invited officially, but he knew about it. So we were able to go. And it turned out that there was a town that was the first town to go under lava. I'll tell you a bit about that in a minute, or what the day of the eruption. On day one, very early on, went under, and they weren't even invited to this meeting. So figure that out. I don't know what we were doing. Anyway, the meeting was absolutely awful and shambolic. They were more obsessed with disinfecting their microphones from COVID than they were than actually communicating anything to the populace. They were mumbling. They hadn't been given any training in how to, talk, give a talk. So they were mumbling. They weren't, and they kept saying, "Oh, this meeting is to give you information," and that's the only thing they said. They never actually gave us any useful information. They just mumbled away, spraying down their microphone in between talks. It was completely awful. But it had a very useful effect, because Fiona and I came away and we said, these people don't know what they're doing. We're on our own. We've got to look after ourselves here. No one's coming to save us. So, and then on the Saturday night and Sunday morning, the earthquakes were terrible. It was very difficult to sleep, getting shaken awake every few minutes. And I was looking at the data during the night, and I could see that the epicenter of these earthquakes were very close to the house and very close to the surface. They were showing us 1 kilometre. And when Fiona and I talked about it later, I said, look, it shows us 1 kilometre. There's nothing less than 1 kilometre on this scale. It could be 500 metres. It could be 100 metres. It could be 50 metres. We don't know. And we both decided it's coming soon and it's coming close, and we're getting out of here. So we finished up our packing. We'd already sort of done our bug out bags and stuffed loads of things in the car. A lot of it was documentation, because Spain is very bureaucratic, and with Fiona's health issues, she needed regular appointments, and I think I told you recently she needed a blood extraction every 3 months. So she needed all her medical paperwork in order to keep going through the system. So that was about 50% of the car. Then we had some valuables, and mostly we left stuff behind. And then we booked some holiday accommodation, and we headed over to the other side of the island. We left at, so we'd been up since 4 a.m. just preparing. We ended up leaving at 11 a.m. and we drove along the road that was up here, that is now under lava. And at 3 p.m. that day, that's when the volcano went off. So and we were on the other side of the island having a picnic by the beach, a late lunch, and we saw all these police cars, about 20 or 30, going along the road, and we just looked at each other and said, "Oh, it started." And then we were driving back to our holiday accommodation. I'll just finish this little part of the story. We got a phone call from our Spanish friend who works in the local organic shop. Really nice person, very good friend of ours. And she said, she told us where the volcano was. And we said, "Oh, the house is lost for sure." Because it's, as I say, it's just up the hill here. So yeah, so sorry, I'll probably get a bit emotional about it. I told you I found this diary I'd made at the time, and I was just reading through it, and I thought, oh, this would be fun. I'll just read through it nice and calmly. I was getting kind of flashbacks to what was happening, like PTSD. But anyway, any questions so far?
Yeah, I do. Well, first of all, I started feeling emotional there, because I can't really imagine what it would be like to have just gotten away just hours before, and then having the event that you have been wondering about, that has been really invading your lives for a couple of days now, leading up to having to flee your home. And then once it started, I don't know, there's just something to that. And I think there is some familiarity that I have with that, because of some of the bad weather that we've had, and dealing with potential serious damage to your home, and knowing people who have had serious damage and people that have had their roofs torn off by tornadoes and things like that, and you don't know what you're going to go back to. But I feel like it's a little, or maybe a lot different than an active volcano that you really don't have a lot of information about. So there's a lot of unknown, and all the information that you do have is just from people from your network. Certainly nothing in an official capacity. And then just wondering what is going to become of our home, and almost being sure that you're going to lose your home. So if you're comfortable with that, tell us about that. What is that like? What was that like for you and Fiona? This is, you put through it all in to move here for a better quality of life and for better health. And now you're looking down the barrel of the gun, basically, at potentially losing your home.
Yeah. It was, people talk about being a roller coaster. I mean, it was probably the most intense experience of my life in many ways. It really was a roller coaster, because apart from that first day when we thought, well, the house is gone for sure, this used to be there was a little picnic spot we used to go up, and there was a little track up there, and we used to go, and they used to have wild figs there, and that was exactly where the volcano came out. And it was, you could see the house quite clearly if you look down down the hill from where we were out picking figs. The house was just below, so we thought, there's no way we can survive this. But actually what had happened was the lava had gone out to the north and we are off to the south. So it's just complete luck, really. And other than that, there were two other occasions where people had gone near the area during the eruption, and they said, "Oh, your house is gone." So, and then we found out later in the day, "Oh no, the house is still there." So we went through it 3 times. Because there was a little checkpoint you used to have, they would allow you in at certain times to try and rescue some stuff, and it was very unsuccessful for us, because most of the time they said, "Oh, it's too dangerous, you can't go in." So we would drive up every few days to this checkpoint they'd set up in the south here on the main road. A lot of times they said, "Hey, you can't go in, it's too dangerous." A couple of times they said you can go in, and then about 2 minutes later they said, "Oh, you've got to come out." So and by this time there was all this volcanic ash piling up on the road, so you couldn't actually drive to our house. You had to drive down below and get someone from the army with like a giant 4-wheel drive monster truck to drive over with all this volcanic ash, because it was already about 1 meter deep in places. So and then we'd have to sort of clamber over this stuff. It's like, going over a sand dune on a beach, get over the wall and try and get into the house and get some stuff out. But I was hopeless at it, really. I was just grabbing things at random, because it's sort of thing, I've got to get out of here. Fiona did a lot better than me, because she's actually quite good in a crisis. She's sort of very clear-headed and thinking about what she really needs. So, but we heard of worse stories that, men would be going into the house to rescue things. The wife would send the man in, and he'd come out with a set of encyclopedias or something. Because what on earth you got that for? We wanted, clothes and bedding and things. So that's men for you, I guess. But what was I going to say? So yeah, it was a real roller coaster of emotions, and I have to say that the local people were fantastic. The bureaucrats and the government people were terrible. But some of the workers, the council workers, were here clearing ash off the roofs and stopping all the roofs from collapsing. So that was great. So there were some really good aspects. You would see the best and the worst in people. I mean, an example of the worst was we booked this emergency accommodation on the island, and then the guy put the price up by 50%, because you could do that because everyone was looking for accommodation urgently. And yet the flat we ended up with, from rented by on the other side of the island in this sort of coastal resort, rented by a lovely family, they actually reduced our rent because they felt sorry for us. So there were some great things and some terrible things, like you see in all disasters, really. Over to you.
Okay, so let us talk about. So you are escaping, quite literally, but possibly for your life, and you may lose your
Hmm.
home. You're going through this emotional roller coaster. Talk to us about those days where this was first happening. So, were you able to be with other people on the other side of the island? Kind of, I almost liken it to here in the States and, well, probably worldwide or the Western world on the day of 9/11. Everybody was glued to the news. People were gathered together. Everybody was watching it to get as much information, to see as much as they possibly
Yeah.
could see. Did you have a chance to be around other people and to kind of watch what was going over these several days, or how long did that last? How long was the volcano actually emitting lava?
Oh, ages. It was going officially from 19th of September to the 13th of December. Believe me, that's a long time when you think every day you can lose your house, or that people are losing your house. When I was looking through this document I was writing, it was full of things like, oh, just found out so and so have lost their house, or lost their business, under lava. And there was quite a big town down the hill, a lovely town with an old church. I don't know how many people were living in there, hundreds. It was a small, La Palma's a small place, but for La Palma, this was quite a big town. The whole town went under lava, not this old, 17th century church, I think it was, or 18th century, knocked it down flat. So, it was really upsetting for a lot of people. And you would meet people all the time who were, evacuated. People were living in our block of flats who were evacuated from a different part. So yeah, and it's like I said, the people were lovely. When they found out you were one of the evacuated people, they couldn't do enough for you. And in fact, they had these donation centres. We went into an estate agent when we were looking for a more long-term accommodation, and she said, "Oh, it's not very much at the moment." But she said, she said, "Oh, come with me." And she locked up the office and took us across her. Saying, "What the hell's going on here?" And she took us to the local sports centre, and it was just full of donated clothes and things. Every time I think about it, it makes me a bit emotional, because it was just people trying to help out local businesses. Excuse me. And I said, "Oh wow, this is really impressive. This is coming from all over Spain." She says, "No, this is just this town, just this small town of like 1,000 people. And they filled this whole arena with donations of food and clothes and things." Amazing. Excuse me. I better hand over to you at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely feel that from you, Terry. That's one of the things in these very difficult times where we are all struggling to kind of figure out how to make our way in the environment that we find ourselves. These are times that we see the amazing kindness from our friends and our neighbors and people that we don't even know. And that it's very inspiring to me, but it also tells us that there's an element that these people, that the powers that shouldn't be, the predator class, there's an element that they don't understand, and that is the human spirit that is doing something for people
Yeah,
that you don't
definitely.
even know, people that you care about because they're in your community and they're having a hard time. And we in all of these situations that
Yeah,
we've seen recently, um as mean as people as we can be to each other, and as much bickering and arguing that happens online or whatever that is, people still care, and that is something that has not been stomped out of people. And hearing these stories, it does make me emotional. And and of course, hearing the emotion in your voice is it is emotional. But in Western North Carolina, many such cases. People sent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of goods to help people that lost everything because they care, not because they know them, but because we are Americans, we are North Carolinians, whatever you want to say. And people volunteered their time to help and to try to find people and rescue people, dig, help to recover buildings and things like that. And that's one of the things that, as difficult as it had to have been for you to go through and experience, that these are beautiful moments of humanity. And that's something that has not been taken from us. And they can't. And that's one of the things that they will never understand, is doing things just like that, is filling up a gymnasium of goods that you paid for and volunteered to donate, that you don't get some kind of benefit or some kind of tax write-off. You're just doing it because you want to help your fellow human.
Yeah, you're right. And I think one of the lessons would be for all these things that, the authorities are not only not going to help as much, they're going to get in the way, and they try and exploit disasters for their own means. There's been a lot of fraud going on here with money that have been donated, and also there was like EU recovery money that was supposed to, help in the reconstruction, and they've been using that for inappropriate projects, using it for build roads that weren't even affected by the volcano in a different part of the island. It's scandalous, really, and people are very angry about it here. But a lot of people were demanding an accounting of what happened to all the money that was donated, because millions of euros probably was donated from all over Spain, and including some famous footballers, soccer players, who donated quite a lot of their own personal wealth to try and help out, and nobody knows where all the money went. There's been no accounting for it, and there are still obviously people in a lot of hardship. I mean, they have this sort of funny arrangement with insurance where it's kind of done by for disasters, it's all handled by what you would call in the UK a quango, which is like an NGO, I guess. So it's got some government connections, but it's sort of quasi-independent. And it's terrible. I mean, we're short probably by we reckon about 50,000 euros in terms of the damage. Because what happened to our house is that, unfortunately, they had, so our house was a restricted zone because it was so close to the volcano. So as I said before, they were controlling people going in and out. And unfortunately, what happened, they let some old guy in. He was supposed to go into this one house and he wandered off somewhere else, some friend or neighbour or relative or something. And he died. We don't really know why he died. I suspect he just fell off the roof because he was quite an old guy, apparently. But they said, this might seem familiar to you. It's like the COVID deaths. They said, he must have died from the volcano, so we can't let anyone else in now. So all these teams from the local council have been clearing the volcanic ash off the roofs. That was all stopped. So nobody could go into this place anymore. We weren't allowed to rescue any more stuff. So from then on, all the roofs of the house, our house has got a roof like an M with a central channel. That completely filled up with ash. There was a lot of rain because it was the autumn, or the fall, as you guys call it. And so the rain overtopped this central channel because of all the ash that was in it. And so basically we had a huge flood in the house, which destroyed pretty much everything inside. So, we were kind of in a grey area, because if the house had gone under lava, there'd have been no question that, we've lost the house due to the volcano. We might have done better. But because I suppose they could say, well, it wasn't really anything to do with the volcano. Well, of course it was. But, so anyway, it was a battle. And we got to the stage where we just had enough. And we thought, we can't be doing this anymore. Fiona wrote, hundreds of letters, sent loads of photos and things and evidence and documentation. And we didn't really get anywhere. So we got some money, but as I say, we're probably short of about €50,000 because basically we lost, apart from the damage that was done to the house by the earthquakes and the damage to the garden and the garden walls, and we lost pretty much everything inside the house. So, when you add that up, that's a lot of money. So anyway, so we've just had to take that hit and try and get on with things, because in the end, it's like when you're battling with government bureaucracy, it's it can drain all the energy out of your life, can't it? And if you're not getting anywhere, it's possibly best just to move on, which Fiona hated doing because she doesn't like injustice, but I think she's realised that life's too short, particularly for us. We're getting on a bit, and we spent a lot of years now trying to repair the house. So fortunately we've got some savings that can cover it, but it's not ideal. And there are people a lot worse off than us. There are people who've lost their house and they've only been offered we know someone who lives up the hill. Their house was more or less completely destroyed, and they were offered €5,000. So yeah, it's scandalous, really. But then some people have done very well. Probably depends on who you know, because it's that sort of place. Over to you. You've probably got some more questions.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I find interesting, and this may be worthy of us exploring a little bit more, is what are the government incompetencies that we can see in what happened to you, and then how that seemed to kind of play into what we saw not long after that in Lahaina, in North Carolina, in East Palestine, as Cecilia brings up, in the LA fires, and on we go. So whether there was something that was a pattern of change, or whether or not just the way that these events are being discussed and talked about, whereas they probably wouldn't have been maybe discussed and talked about as much before. There was a lot of conversation around in Lahaina, for example, but in all of these places, is this a land grab? Is the government incompetency that we saw displayed here, was that intentional? And that's not really a conversation that you and I have had in regards to discussing what happened on La Palma, but it certainly fits in to these types of events and is worth discussing and looking at. And we saw some very blatant mismanagement of what was happening, particularly in Lahaina. They talked about that certain key public figures were also connected to other major events or psychological operations perhaps that happened, and that alarms were not sounded when they should have been sounded, and people were turned away. And it just so happened to be on the backs of homeowners insurance being canceled and things like that. And we saw this in Lahaina. We saw the homeowners insurance issue happening in the LA fires. And we saw government incompetence happening that's being blamed on Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass, I believe is her name, the mayor in LA. So there's a lot there. And then here in North Carolina, we saw or we heard a lot about certain issues with FEMA. We heard that they wanted that this was a land grab. We heard that this was an attempt to get to the lithium mines in North Carolina, which it is true that there are lithium mines in western North Carolina, and there's also a quartz mine in these areas. So we're looking at sort of the mismanagement. Are these events simply happening and they are being capitalized upon, or deliberate malfeasance? That's an entire conversation, but we can look at La Palma in these terms as well. But the interesting thing about what happened to you on La Palma is that it was not in this super talked about way that some of these other events were, right? And part of that's because it's a small island. Part of that's because it's not in the United States for us here. but it is worth considering. So that's one thing, and you can give some input on that if you want, and maybe we can even save that for another conversation, doing some compare and contrast. And then the other thing that I want to get into is the waiting period. How long? I mean, I have an idea of how long, but let's tell everyone listening, how long was it that you're kind of living in this temporary housing arrangement and dealing with your, your flat that you call your apartment where y'all were living, and kind of having to do
Yeah.
this like back and forth, and you're worrying every single day about exactly what you said about the ash collection and the flooding and all of these kinds of things. Did you even know that that was happening?
The last question first. No, we didn't. We didn't know. We worried about. Well, Fiona worried about it in particular because she anticipated that there were going to be problems with the flooding. I was trying to sort of remain optimistic, but every time it rained, yeah, she worried about that. She realised what was going to happen, I think. In terms of the apartment, sorry, I should have said flat. I should have said apartment. We were there for about 15 months in the end because it was a while after the eruption before we were let back. I think we were let back possibly January, February. You have to bear in mind that when we got back to the house, there was about 2 meters of volcanic ash all around. So you had to clamber over this. Fortunately, the front door has a sort of porch area, so that was kind of protected, so we could open that door. But when you get in, it's just a disaster area, so there's no way you could live there for ages. So one of the amusing things that we talk about is that the period of the volcano I associated with what we call in London humping, which is not quite as exciting as it sounds. It means I was carrying a lot of stuff. So I was carrying all the stuff to the flat, down from the flat, and then we had this. They gave us this storage facility in one of the towns, so we had to store a lot of stuff in there when we first got the house back because we didn't really know what to do with it. It probably we should have thrown a lot of it away straight away, but it's quite difficult to do that with property that's has some value and emotional attachment to you. So we were sort of, it was kind of like a way of triaging it. If there was, stick it all in this storage facility, and it's still there. Most of it's still there. We've got first load of boxes out just a couple of weeks ago, but most of it is still there. So this is like 4 years on, and largely we've replaced it all with other stuff. So we'll probably get it out and we'll throw it away because a lot of it's damaged by mold and damp and all sorts of horrible things. There was like in certain places in the house, it was like a toxic soup where all this water had gone into like cotton sheets and stuff, and it had all been fermenting and growing all this variety of horrible microorganisms and fungi, and it was just absolutely the lights were sort of hanging down with all this mold, and it was a bit of a horror show, really. So that's why we had to be in a flat for so long, because we didn't really have anywhere to live until we'd sort of done the basics here to make it kind of livable. And we're still doing stuff. I mean, I'm still working on stuff, as you know, to this day. I've been putting a kitchen back into the flat next, because our house is divided into 3 parts. We have a sort of main apartment, we have a guest apartment next door, and we have a sort of studio bit as well. So the last thing we were tackling is the guest apartment, because we're not going to use it. So hopefully we'll be finished fairly soon, next year, hopefully. And then we've still got to tackle the garden, which is looking like a builder's yard because of all the work that's been done and all the damage that hasn't still been repaired. So go back on a couple of other things. There's a couple of things I wanted to say. There definitely is a land grab going on here, for sure. It's like we say, that the authorities love to exploit disasters for their own purposes. So we know of people whose land has been kind of seized for building roads, or maybe they're going to build new houses, but they're not going to the land is not automatically going to as far as we can see, automatically belong to the previous owners. And there's land up here, up where the volcano is, where there have been houses that are buried. To me, they should still own the land, but no, that looks like that's going to be deemed a national park. And I don't think there's going to be any compensation for the owners, as far as I can see. I know for sure there's a neighbour up the hill. We happened to talk to her when we were walking up there recently, or a few months ago. And she said, because they're building a little tourist centre where you can walk over the new lava and look at the volcano. And to do that, they've had to build a new road. And they just took some of our land. I said, we were saying, did they pay you for it and compensate? No, they just took it. So it's like eminent domain, they call it in the UK, where the government says, we're having your land, there's nothing you can do about it. So, but we don't think they can control volcanoes. Like, possibly they can start fires, whether by using crazy energy weapons or just people going out and lighting fires, that are paid to do so. We don't think they can do that with volcanoes, but for sure they have taken the opportunity to grab it. And there's new land created down by the sea, which we think automatically belongs to the government. So there you go. They've got some brand new land to play with for nothing. A couple more points I wanted to say. I want to go back to another sort of COVID type lesson. The science, it's just like COVID. They don't understand these things as well as they like to make out. Science, in particular volcanology, and of course we looked into it a bit after this happened, is extremely poorly understood. So I don't think they didn't have a clue where this was actually going to happen in detail. And I don't think there's any way you can know, or when it was going to happen until the earthquake swarm started. So, they like to make out they know stuff, but they don't really. So, but if they were using the COVID scenario where they think, well, we have to do something, to be safe. Well, they didn't do that in this case because, like I say, the people weren't warned properly. And I think I said there were these 4 levels of yellow, green is okay, yellow, something's happening, orange, eruption imminent, red, eruptions actually happening. Orange alert doesn't exist. They were never going to go to orange alert. We found this out afterwards, because even if the so-called scientific experts were saying, we think we should go to orange alert, the politicians didn't want to do that because they couldn't be 100% sure it was going to happen. And they didn't want to lose face by saying, you really ought to be evacuating, and then nothing happened. So that was never going to happen. And our neighbours were still out in the garden when the eruption went off, and you can see it, you'd be able to see it quite. Some of them were so traumatized they didn't want to come back. And we only saw them, maybe a year after we moved back here. Some of them were still coming back because they were so traumatized by it. And you talked earlier about Mount St. Helens. Another point I want to make was that volcanologists didn't realize quite how dangerous some volcanoes could be until that happened, because you get these things called pyroclastic flows. And I don't know if you've heard of them. You get this hot ash that's blown out of the volcano, and if the weather conditions are right, it can roll down the hill and it just blasts you apart with the heat. So this was always a mystery with the Pompeii in Italy about why the people died, and it turned out they were killed by pyroclastic flows. And it was when I believe it was Mount St. Helens that sort of triggered this in volcanologists' mind that, wow, this can be really dangerous. Now, we were getting pyroclastics flows here, but they weren't, fortunately, going down the hill. If they had done, it would have killed hundreds of people that were in the first town. It was extremely dangerous. They were really lucky that nobody was killed, apart from this bloke who possibly fell off a roof. So it could have been a big disaster. As it is, they lost more than 1,000 houses. So we're still feeling the effects of that. The rents have gone up. People can't find places to live. There are people still living in port cabins and shipping containers to this day. So yeah, it's a bad situation. Over to you.
That sounds very familiar, Terry, about people having to scramble for even temporary housing months and years later after the event. whenever it, of course, should have been a priority. And it's very frustrating for us to see, especially, for people in me from a liberty perspective or anarchist perspective or whatever you want to say, knowing the tax burden that the working person carries in all Western countries, right? It is absolutely significant, and they always have enough money for more bombs. They always have enough money for more war.
Yeah.
But they never have enough money
Yeah.
and enough resources in order to take care of the people who actually, it's made up money at this point, but you know what I mean? It's the working man. It's off of their back, and they never are there for them.
Yeah.
There is never any efficiency for things like that. And it's one of the issues that really doesn't, it does get talked about and discussed, but not enough, it's really frustrating to see how people are treated. And as you said beforehand, if you're getting some indication, and I feel like there's no way that maybe not the Canary Islands, but there's no way that somebody in Europe or Spain was not keeping an eye on the activity that was happening there. And people, as you said, more people could have died. There wasn't anything that could have been done that we know of to prevent the flow of the lava, the blast zone, or anything like that. But people could have been removed and not cutting it so close to a near-death experience of being, killed by a volcano. So it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
But in a lot of these topics, we certainly can get more in depth on, and I definitely don't want us to lose the plot for the land grab that you're saying. And this is really interesting to me because in the alternative space, a lot of these events are being talked about, and they are talking about the land grab. We had Bettina from Geoengineering Free Canada in the chat, and she was talking about what is happening in Nova Scotia right now. And a lot of us have seen some information. My friend Doc Spoiler sent me some information about that they're, restricting people's access basically to, hiking and campgrounds and things like that. And it's all under this guise of fire safety and preventing wildfires and things like that. So, but we haven't heard really very much coverage about what is happening to where you live and your island. And if people in the States don't think it's important, well, I think that we may need to change our perspective on that, because first of all, the European Union is important on the global stage. Clearly, the United States is involved in that milieu, and we need to be paying attention to what is happening there as well. And this is certainly something that should have been on our radar more. So I'm glad that we're finally having this conversation. As we said, we had been talking about it for forever, but we finally just pulled the trigger and had that discussion today. And I want to get into a little bit more of your experience, Terry. But first of all, I do want to shout out the people that have joined us in live. So over on YouTube, we have Bettina at Geoengineering Free Canada. We have a squirrel. So and those are the folks that we had our conversation with about communitarianism. So that was a really interesting conversation if you want to check that out. And thank you for joining us over there. And then over on Rumble, we have a really active chat. And I always like interacting with everyone here. And I'm sorry that I've been neglectful, but I want to make sure that we tell Terry's story really well. So I just wanted to shout out everyone over there. So we have Cecilia. She joined us. We have Anna at End Imperialism. Thank you both so much for being here. We have CJP Rumble. Thank you. And we have Melanie as well. And we had Foggy. I lost the top of the chat, but we had Foggy as well. And anyway, the folks over in Rumble, many of them, I see them in a lot of the Nights of the Storm chat. I mean, almost every week. And I just want to say how much I truly appreciate it. It means
Right.
a lot to see y'all here today. I really love it. I feel the love. Terry feels the love, I hope. And they are, praying for you and concerned for you, Terry, over in the chat. So
Absolutely.
thank you all so much. I'm very moved.
Yeah,
So
thanks.
okay,
Yeah,
so
thanks a
while
lot.
we yes. Okay, so we've established kind of the failures of the government to alert the people, even though they were so over the top about the COVID propaganda. That's very frustrating. We saw the frustrating part of people not being fully compensated for their land, as far as like these land grabs and eminent domain, as you said, as well as dealing with the insurance companies for things that clearly were related to government malfeasance and the natural disaster that just occurred that ended up being a ton of damage. We saw that you and your wife had to get out. It was basically last minute, and that the alert system was very, very poor. And then you were on the hook for renting an apartment for, I mean,
No.
you haven't been out of the apartment for that long. What has it been, like a year and a half that you've been out of the apartment?
I think it was
And
about a year and a half. Yeah, maybe 15 months, a year and a half, something like that. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. So, okay, so we kind of have that. Now, at the time that you're staying in the apartment or your flat, you were trying to check in with what was left of your home at that point, and I'm guessing you were kind of trying to just waiting on when you were allowed to go back and to start work on the home. So, talk to us a little bit about going back to the house. You've already told us that there's a ton of damage that you know that you're going to have to deal with. So, talk to us a little bit about that process of, okay, where do we even start? We're now allowed to go back into the area and, travel freely, as it were, but we really have a mess. And you had said this to me several times during, these last several years, that we almost feel like it maybe it would have been better if the house had been taken, because of this real middle area that you were in. With the house is still there, but essentially it's still destroyed and still from because of the volcano. So just talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes, there's a few things. So, I wanted to, you made me remember something else I wanted to say. You were asking me if I was checking up on what was happening. I was, as much as I could, but Fiona found it too upsetting. So she was never watching sort of news or videos about the progress of the lava and what the volcano was doing. Another thing I'd say about government incompetence was that there was a charity that would be putting up drones to sort of film over the lava, so you could see where it's going. And you sometimes, if you're lucky, you could see whether your house is still there or not. But the authorities would often try to stop them doing it, and they say, no, we can't allow this, But they weren't putting up any of their own, so they had the possibility of giving people all this information about what was actually happening at the time. Because it was like a war zone. You couldn't really find out what was happening because you couldn't go to the lava, and sort of it was too dangerous. And you couldn't sort of look at the volcano because that was too dangerous as well. So you were relying on the people who were able to access that area to give information out and tell you what was going on. And it was just terrible, real lack of information in official sources. But this charity was doing quite a good job. But there should have been some official process where they could fly over the whole lava extent every day and everyone would know where you were. Sorry, yes, Ash.
Don't apologize, Terry. But I just wanted to just chime in that was that was very similar to a lot of other people. The lack of information, we heard about in Lahaina, that essentially they burned these people out. Their homeowners insurance had just been canceled, and then they erected a giant black fence around the entire area and forbid people from going and searching and looking. So why is that? And is that part of some kind of operation against us because it does something to you not to be able to check on your house and your property, or what? And I don't know if you have an answer or a thought on that, but I just wanted to bring it up that is very similar to a lot of these other situations that we've seen.
Yeah, I think it's partly to cover up their incompetence, because if people don't know what they're up to, they can't complain about it. But it may be, in the case of the fires, I think it was probably to cover up some nefarious purpose that they had behind. And maybe, that I've often heard from Lahaina in particular that the death toll was a lot greater than the official numbers were saying they were letting on. So maybe they didn't want people to see that and show what a complete catastrophe that it was, because there was a lot of incompetence going on there for sure. And maybe they think, well, if they don't find out, we're off the hook and we can't get prosecuted potentially, or end up in jail for what we've done. There was a little story here that you'll like this one. There was a property with some dogs that, because the owners had obviously had to clear off in a hurry. But these dogs were still on this property, and there was people were making a bit of a fuss locally, saying something should be done about these dogs, and the authorities said no, we can't do that. Anyway, this sort of ninja team of ordinary people went in at night, rescued all these dogs, and got them out before the lava came down and swallowed them up. So that was
amazing.
Good. So yeah, and this annoys the hell out of me, and probably you too, when government stops ordinary people from doing things to help. Okay, it's dangerous. We know it's dangerous. It's up to us whether we expose ourselves to danger or not. We were saying this all the time. We're saying, look, well, I don't care if it's dangerous to go to our house. We want to go to our house and rescue our property. I'll sign anything and say, look, we take responsibility for it. We're not going to blame anyone. And I bet you probably noticed that Stu's been posting this stuff on Discord about Canada, that they're stopping people walking in the woods because, first of all, they said, well, we don't want them to start fires. And now they're saying, well, if something happens to you, wouldn't there be no one to rescue you because we're all busy fighting fires? And I don't care. I don't care if you come and rescue me. It's my responsibility. I'll take my responsibility for myself. Thanks very much. That just annoys the hell out of me. So, in the Spanish Constitution, which is, like a lot of constitutions, one of the things it gives you the right to is the right to your property. And we weren't allowed to access that property. That, to me, goes against our constitutional rights. Should never have happened. Anyway, that's my rant over. I can't remember what the question you asked me was now.
It was a long one. So it was kind of basically like, what was this process of waiting? And you answered some of that, the lack of information about being able to get to your house, get to your property. And then, of course, you talked to us about wanting to assume risk for yourself because you and your wife are adults. Sure. And and you're smart enough to do risk assessment on your own. And there was, of course, government meddling in that as well. So then talk to us about when they finally let you start going back to your house, when it was deemed safe enough. Talk to us about what that process was like, because I know there was a very long time where y'all were going back and forth. We're doing a little bit of this, but we're staying at the flat. We're going back here to work, but we're, so there was really a lot of in between time of trying to get the house ready to come back home.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of journeys involved. And also we were trying to sort of do what the government was asking us to do in terms of the bureaucracy. So we had a lot of trips to our local council to sign documents. There's another lie they told you was that, you said you just have to register on this one register. It's called the unique register. You just have to register that and everything else will be done. That was a complete lie. You have to register multiple times in multiple different places. And it's complicated here because you've got the local council, then you've got the La Palma government, then you've got the Canary Islands government, then you've got the Spanish government. We had to deal with each of those because each of them had their own different ideas about how they were going to compensate you, or what you're supposed to do. It was a complete fucking nightmare. And one of our, we found out afterwards that one of our neighbours said, "I'm not doing any of that. I'm just, I'm doing my own thing." And that's what we should have done. We should never have bothered, because it didn't really help us that much. It was supposed to be a way of getting compensation, and we didn't really get that much. Not worth the effort. If we'd have been being paid for our time, we would have been getting about €1 an hour. So no thanks. We're not doing that again. Once again, I've forgotten your question. I get into a rant, and it just it all sort of comes out of me. There was a lot. There's a lot of anger about this process.
Yeah,
but basically, Sorry, I remember that. We came back to the house. Sorry, yes, it's good. Carry on.
No, you go ahead, Terry. I feel like it makes a lot of sense, because even though we have talked about it over the years, we have not just sat down to have this conversation that we really have wanted to have for a while. And you're kind of reliving a lot of things. And as you said before, and going back through your notes, like it triggers all kinds of other memories and how you felt during this process, and the, how the government really created, so many hoops for the regular people to jump through. And that's once again how it's used against us, whether that's intentional or not. It is used against us. It is barriers for you to get A and B and C done when it doesn't need to be this difficult, especially after what you've been through. And it is demoralizing, And as you said, looking back, you wish that you would never have even messed with that. But at the time, you don't know how many people, how many times do you go through a volcano? Hopefully only once. But that's okay. So we're we're touching on a whole lot of other issues here, but that's fine, because, the folks in the chat are, I don't want to say enjoying, because enjoying sounds weird about your circumstance, but they care about your story and what you went through. And I think that just getting it out there is a positive, because it's really a firsthand account of so many other situations, but of course specific to you and Fiona and what you went through there. So it's fine for us to ramble and go all over. And then if we want to do more in-depth, more concise or specific episodes touching on this later, we will do that.
Thanks. Well, it helps get it off my chest at least. But you're right. We had to keep doing these trips, not only to the flat, but also to our council offices. It used to be 5 minutes up the road in this northerly direction. Of course, all the main roads were cut by lava, so we had to now go all the way around the south end of the island. So it was a very long trip, and it's just and you could almost, when we were at the council offices, you could almost see our house from there, over the lava, except there are many meters of lava, but theoretically you could. So it was very frustrating. So we were probably the first people back in this immediate neighbourhood, and we spent a lot of time just cleaning stuff, getting stuff out of the house, trying to clean it as best we could. We were putting it out in the sun so that the UV could help sterilise it. Treating it with hydrogen peroxide. We bought ozone generating machines to try and kill off all the mold that was growing on the walls, which seemed to work pretty well. And yet another example of government ridiculousness and incompetence. They kept telling us, saying, "Oh, it's dangerous because of the gases." So I bought some cheap gas detectors from AliExpress. And I just had them in there, and I've got them here down below in the desk, down below my desk. They're still operating down here. And so I knew that the levels of carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and sulfur dioxide, and what have you, I knew that it was safe most of the time. So every now and then you get a little blip where it would go up a bit, but not to dangerous levels. And in fact, the thing that would set the gas detectors off most would be when a lorry went past on the road at the back, to do some building work somewhere, and that all the CO2 that was coming out of that would set them off much more than anything from the volcano. But anyway, so we've been back a while, a few months, I think. So at this time, we didn't have any water. We didn't have remains of water. We didn't have any remains of electricity. That both of those came along a bit later. So that meant on our journeys around the island, we had to stop off at this public tap at the south tip of the island and fill up all these empty 8-litre bottles of mineral water. So we were buying lots of mineral water, drinking it, keeping the bottles and filling them up so we could do like washing and things when we got up here. And then, so initially we'd be spending the days here, then going back at night to the flat, to the apartment. But yeah, we had a bit of a COVID type clown show that we saw this video on the news of all the police in like all this protective gear and sort of gas respirators and things. And we were saying, what's going on there? And we looked at it, that's just outside our house. What the hell are they doing? And they were going about, so the spin was on the propaganda. They banned people from the town down the hill from going in altogether. They'd only just been let in fairly recently. They've been banned for years from accessing property, and their excuse was the gas levels were too high. So they set up this thing where the news company was covering these police, and they were climbing on the lava, literally outside our house, about 20 meters away from us. And we were sort of sitting in there thinking, what the hell is going on? I've got all this protective gear on, and we're, I was looking at my gas detectors, well, there's nothing here. And they were going, they're on the TV thing, that was going beep, beep, beep. Oh, this is really dangerous. And they were saying, yeah, still really high levels of gas. It's really dangerous here. And we were thinking, well, why didn't they knock on our door and tell us it's dangerous and get out? So that was just complete propaganda. Because we were here, you could see through it straight away. And it was to justify the continual ban on these people from accessing their property at this town down here, which they really weren't happy about at all. And a lot of the locals, when we spoke to the locals afterwards, they said, there's always been high levels of gas here. This is a volcanic island, and this is a place where, you just got to remember to keep your windows open and not hang about in the basement too much. So, and all they needed to do was give people gas detectors like my ones, which cost about €10 from AliExpress. Give them these and say, look, if the gas levels get high, open the windows or get outside. But no, it was just obviously it was just going to be a complete ban, just like they do for everything else. So yeah, we spent a lot of time cleaning and sorting things out, and we're still basically doing that.
So has it gotten easier, as far as, because I know when you first were starting to work on the house, and even when you first moved back into your house and you're kind of winding down from your flat, that you had these very big projects. And I know that you're still working on some things to this day, but do you feel, is there a sense of being on the home stretch, a sense of like we're almost back to normal and we'll get back to our, as normal of life as we can, considering kind of the changes to the island from the volcano? Or, how are you now with where you're at on the work that still has to get done?
I think so. All the major stuff's been done. I've been putting in kitchens and bathrooms and sinks and things. So we've got a bit of work to finish next door. Outside, as I say, it's a little bit of a disaster area. So, but potentially we could finish it all. Probably not this year, but sometime next year. But Fiona's really fed up with it all. I think she wanted to sort of abandon the place right from the start, really. But it was very difficult to know what we were going to do if we did that, where we were to go, because we'd lost 1,000 houses on the island, so it wouldn't be that easy to find another property. We'd probably have to live off the island. A lot of people we know did leave. Some of them are living in Spain, in the mainland. Some of them have moved to another island, so a lot of people left. So yeah, I guess it is getting better. We've got livable areas, but we're still a bit chaotic, really. But I would say the finishing line is maybe in sight. But in many ways, possibly it would have been easier if we'd have the lava had taken the house completely. The problem you got is that on this side of the volcano, they had a few what they call cone collapses, where the cone partially sort of fell in and loads of lava came out. That all happened on the north side. So we didn't really get a huge amount of lava on this side of the volcano, but we got small amounts in certain places. So some of our former neighbours, who'd be like, so the lava's like 2 houses away in this direction in north. So there are houses beyond that have got maybe a metre of lava in. They can't do anything with their property at all. The insurance scheme, which is like this government quango I was talking about, government NGO, they won't pay them out because they say your house is still there, it's still survived, and they are not allowed to dig out the lava on their land for some reason that we don't really know. Nobody knows why the lava is protected, but every time people try to clear their property, like we've got a solar farm just up here to the east of us, and he tried to he lost 2/3 of his solar panels under lava and ash, and he was trying to clear the remaining part of his land so that he could put some solar panels back on, and he was stopped by the sort of local environment people from the government saying you're not allowed to do that. Nobody really knows. Even our Guardia Civil neighbour, who's high up in the Guardia Civil, he says the lava's protected, but nobody knows who's protecting it. Nobody knows why. But every time you try to dig it out, somebody stops you. So there are, as I say, there are people in a lot worse situation than us. These people who own property with some lava on, or some ash that's in the zone that they've deemed you're not allowed to do anything. They're just in limbo, and they've been in limbo for 4 years, and there's still no end in sight, and nobody knows what's going to happen to these people.
So you're saying, just to clarify, you're saying that people have lava on their own property and the lava is protected, and we don't know why, and
Yes.
we really don't know by who, but you do
Yes.
know that if you start to try to dig out from that or remove that or touch that structure, that you are going to be harassed by local government officials. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. We think the rumor was, there was a very strong rumor at the start, even told to us by the plumbers who were reconnecting our water, that they wanted to eliminate this whole zone, which is 72 houses, and make it a part of the national park that they want to have. So this is another land grab example I'm talking about. And this guy had been in meetings where they were talking about this. So it wasn't just a rumor. This was discussed as a serious proposition. I think in the end, they thought, we can't do this. This is going to be way too controversial. We've lost 1,000 houses. We can't grab another 72 for no reason. So we think that is kind of off the table, that. But as our area is written into a new law that covers what they're doing about the volcano, so we're still we don't really know quite what our situation is. It is possible that they will say in the end, this whole area is going to be part of the park. So we think that's probably why they don't want to dig out the lava. They think they want to, all this would be great for tourists, and great for, protected lands owned by the government. But of course, it's highly likely that people won't be compensated, or if they are, they're not going to be compensated the full value of their house.
And that is something that you have said to me many times over the years in our discussion about this, or just in the chat in general, that the land grab is really what you thought was part of the playbook here. That basically this was what the goal was, is to have the land grab, and then that you and Fiona had the concern of how is that going to affect, of course, our friends and our neighbors, but how is it going to affect our house right here? And that is something that you have spoken about quite a bit over these years. So, again, there's a lot more for us to talk about. And do you still have time, Terry? Are you still good?
Yeah, we should probably not go. We're going to be coming up to an hour and a half soon, but I'm good for a while. But
okay, all right,
maybe
cool.
Should save some for next time.
Yes,
But
we
we'll
definitely
go
can
for
do that.
about another 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, we can say up to like 15, something like that. But so one thing that I want to make sure that we do
Yeah.
is put our email address out here. So if you'll send me that in the private chat, I'll bring it up to the screen. And if they want to email you or if they want to email me questions I can pass along to you or things that we can address in our next episode about this. But while you're doing that, I also
Yeah.
wanted to ask the question as far as, okay, so we've kind of established the timeline, everything that you and Fiona have been dealing with as far as trying to get back to your house, all the many concerns, all the bureaucratic nonsense that you're dealing with. And in spite of that, you and I know that it hasn't been easy and we've talked about this, but you have maintained pretty high spirits, especially considering the situation that you find yourselves in, right? I feel like you and Fiona have not let this get you down. So it would be easy, though, for this to have gotten you down. So talk to me about how you kind of supported each other and how you decided that we're still going to enjoy our life here. We're going to have good food, good wine. We're going to still participate in the community and we're going to make the best of the situation that we find ourselves in. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's even that's been difficult because we didn't always see things the same way. Fiona wanted to abandon the house rather than try to fix it up and then sort of think about what we're going to do with it later. As I said to you earlier, I was sort of thinking, well, where are we going to go? You know, and I worried about her health as well because we know that her health's not the best, and I wasn't sure she'd be up to another relocation. So I didn't think it was a particularly good idea, but I knew that by not doing that, we were taking on this huge sort of millstone around our necks that's going to be with us for the next few years. And we talked about the idea of finding her somewhere to live, somewhere else in the island, hopefully, and then me just working here to try and get the house back and we meet up, like go back to work, really, meet up at weekends and some evenings. But yeah, it's very difficult to know. It's hard to anticipate what you're going to do. As like you said, it's a kind of unique situation. It's hard to anticipate what you're going to do until you're faced with it, really. And my way of dealing with lots of things in my life has just been to sort of look at the next step, and that's the way I've been tackling this house. Really, if you think about it right at the start, it was totally overwhelming. They used to say this in business meetings in the UK at times. If you want to eat an elephant, you just do it one bite at a time. So I just look at the next step, and then every little achievement is great, and it makes like when we finished the kitchen here, we had a kitchen, and we could carve out a little living area where with a TV we could watch films, and so each time you're making it a little bit more livable and getting back to nearer to what you had before. I don't think we'll ever get back quite to what it was before. The other I worry too about the house in that, it was riddled with black mold, and for sure, just like I do, that's very bad for your health. So we do still worry that Fiona's getting effects from that when she's in the house at times, particularly in the winter. So during the winter, we closed the back. One of the things we did when we got back, we enclosed the back area into a sort of conservatory. So she sleeps out there a lot of the time during the winter because it's she feels healthier there, and we're hoping that she's going to be able to get back to sleep in the bedroom soon. So yeah, it has been very difficult, but we try to support each other. We basically have quite a nice time with each other most of the time. So we've always, being Brits, I suppose, we always try to look at things with humour and sort of make jokes about things, and that tends to be the way we live our lives anyway. So So yeah, I mean, today we had a nice day at the beach, and we were off to our butchers we like on the other side of the island, and bought loads of good quality meat and liver. And then I had a picnic on the beach. So we still, we're still getting out and trying to do nice things when she's able to do, which isn't always. So yeah, I don't know how to answer that question really. You just do the best you can, don't you? You sort of I always think there's not much point in complaining about what happens to you. I do sort of think on a more spiritual level that, the big things that happen to you in your life are kind of meant to happen to you for some reason or other. We don't always know what the reason is, but I like to look at it that way. It's a sort of learning experience. Over to you.
Yeah, I think that is a good place to kind of wrap up the conversation. I did want to let everyone know that I have this on the screen. It's a bastardized version of Terry's email address because YouTube doesn't want that is the only one of YouTube, Rumble, and Twitch that is very compatible with displaying on StreamYard, and YouTube does not want you dropping links in the chat, so they give you difficulty there. But it is Terry, Terry at epsilon-software.co.uk. So that is Terry at epsilon, epsilon-software.co.uk. And then if you have any questions that you want us to discuss, or if you want me to pass them along to Terry, or something unrelated, feel free to, you can email us at unionoftheunknowns at gmail.com, or you can email me at thinkchangerepeat@gmail.com. So feel free to reach out to us. I know a lot of people who are listening with us have been really touched by Terry's story and everything that they've been through. So, feel free to reach out with us or to us about that. Again, I want to thank everybody so much for joining us on the live. I know we don't have a good schedule. I know that it's, last minute, it's all over the map. It's like my hair, it's crazy. But we really appreciate you taking your time to be here with us. We appreciate all of the support that you've given us in the chat, and just, using your time to be here with us. It is not taken for granted. We truly do appreciate it, and we appreciate you and all of your support. So, thank you everyone again. And then, so we'll go ahead and sign off there. And I will let everyone know the other way that they can get in touch with us. And that, I'm glad that I asked myself. And that is at our Linktree page.
I'm glad you asked yourself that question.
And that's our Linktree page, and that's unionoftheunknowns.com. And that's all the myriad ways to get in touch with us. Y'all know that. Also, you can find us over on the Knights of the Storm webpage. Jason has our link and information over there. So if you're more comfortable there, check that out. But otherwise, we will look forward to seeing you next time, hearing from you if you feel like reaching out. Thank you so much again for taking the time to be with us. And Terry, any last words from you? And I just want to say before I hand it over to you, thank you so much for talking about this. It's been emotional. It's a lot of information. You've been through a lot. I know it's brought up a lot of memories and feelings for you. So I just want to thank you for, being vulnerable for us and talking to us about what you and Fiona and some of your friends and neighbors have been through.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to talk about these things, I think. And if I was to leave you with a positive note, even when you're faced with volcanoes, you can bust them. So, be positive. There's always a way through it at the end of the day. So, like I was saying on Discord as well, I'm hoping that it will cool down enough so I can go down the tunnels and find all the aliens that are down there. So that'll be quite interesting.
Well, that's right up my alley, Terry. So I'm excited to hear about your reports on the underground aliens. And yes, so this is part 1 of how Terry Canary became the volcano buster. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Union of the Unknowns. You can find new episodes every week on all your favorite podcasting networks.